morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. It seems like every time we turn on the TV or any kind of social media these days, we read the word tariff or an article about tariff wars. And in fact, if you live anywhere on earth, the thing that may affect your life the most over the next couple of years is a tariff. And I've watched some content online and I've read a lot of comments, and I get the impression that a lot of people don't really understand what a tariff is or how it works. So in this video, I'm going to explain what tariffs are. And you're probably asking yourself right away, why would I listen to you about how a tariff works? I already know how a tariff works. Well, I do have a pretty good understanding on the topic because a little bit of my history is when I started to go to university, the first 2 years in university, I majored in economics. I wanted to learn everything I could about money because I wanted to get rich. So I took economics for my first 2 years in university. And after 2 years, I realized that it was really trivial and really boring. And I dropped out of that program and I wanted to do something more challenging. So I started studying physics and math. And I got a degree in physics and math and became a scientist. And I started a career as a scientist. But then after that, I kind of realized as my career progressed that my personality really wasn't in mesh and in tune with the scientific community type of personality. So eventually I got fired. and I got a good severance package, so I was able to just sit around at home and do nothing. And eventually I started making YouTube videos. So here I am. But let's talk about tariffs, okay? That's another story. We'll do a video of that another day. But I think the easiest way to discuss tariffs without, doing all this technical speak and big words is just use an example, okay? And we could talk, tariffs are something that applies between two countries. And I could do the, country A and country B and how it works. But I think it might be more entertaining to actually use real names, okay? So United States, Canada. There's a big trade war going on between our two countries. So let's discuss tariffs. Okay, so let's say there's a company. And now, guys, I'm going to use a baseball as an example. I don't freak out, okay? Oh, we buy all our baseballs from China. That doesn't make sense. This is an example, okay? Let's say a company in Canada makes baseballs. A company here in Canada is making baseballs. It costs them 80 cents to make a baseball. Include all their costs, labor, factories, heating. It costs them 80 cents to produce this baseball. And they want to sell this baseball and they want to make a little bit of a profit. So they want to sell the baseball for $1. And they sell their baseballs around to everyone that wants to buy them for $1. Now, here's a company in the United States that wants to buy baseballs. And they're looking everywhere to buy baseballs in the United States, and maybe they can find baseballs for $1.50, $1.75, and $2, and they're going, I want to get a cheap baseball. Where can I get a cheap baseball? Oh, there's a company in Canada that sells baseballs for $1, so let me buy them. So company in the United States phones company in Canada and says, I'd like to buy your baseball. And company in Canada says, okay, I'll sell it to you for $1. This company wires the money to the Canadian company, and the Canadian company puts the baseball on a truck, and the truck drives across the border and delivers it to the company in the United States. Now, okay, there's some transportation cost in there. Let's say it's like transportation is free in this example, okay? So a company in the United States has bought a baseball for $1, and now they can sell the baseball for $1.25, $1.20, and make a profit. Everything's copacetic. Company here made a baseball for 80 cents. They sold it for $1. They made 20 cents. They sell it to the company in the United States for $1. Company in the United States sells the baseball domestically for $1.20. They make 20 cents. Everything is balanced in the world. Okay, now, U.S. administration hits Canada with a 25% tariff. We're going to tariff Canadians 25. We're going to make them pay. We're going to apply a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports into the United States. Okay, so how does that work? Well, company here wants to buy a baseball. They phone the company in Canada and says, I'd like to buy your baseball. How much is your baseball? Company in Canada says, they're $1. Okay. Company from the U.S. wires this company in Canada $1. Baseball goes on the truck, drives to the U.S. border, gets stopped at the U.S. border. U.S. Custom agent says, oh, this baseball is coming from Canada. This is an import. There is now a tariff on Canadian imports into the United States. We're going to charge you 25% on this. $1, 25% of $1 is 25 cents. pay up. Company that just ordered the baseballs from the US goes, wait a minute, what do you mean pay up? I have to pay up? I thought those damn Canadians were going to pay. What? I have to pay? He has to pay. So he has to pay 25 cents tariff for the import of a Canadian baseball. So who does he pay that money to? He pays that money to the federal government, okay? He pays 25 cents to the federal government, he pays $1 to the Canadian company, and then he gets his baseball. That baseball cost him $1.25 now, right? And he's thinking, well, wait, I used to sell my baseballs for $1.20, now I have to pay $1.25 for it. I'm gonna lose money if I sell them for $1.20, what do I do? Well, I was making 20 cents profit before. They cost me $1. I was selling them for $1.20. Now they cost me $1.25. If I want to make 20 cents profit, I have to sell them for $1.45. So he puts his baseball in his store and he tries to sell it for $1.45. First customer walks in and goes, what the hell's going on? His baseballs last week cost $1.20. Now they cost $1.45. What? This is highway robbery. And the guy says, well, the price has gone up, it's inflation, it's, what I have to feed my kids, it's $1.45. And the consumer in the US goes, well, I'm not paying $1.45. Maybe he reluctantly pays $1.45. He goes, that's a ripoff, I'm not buying any more of your baseballs. Time goes by. Now, this is a little colorful example, okay? I'm embellishing here, and so maybe to make it entertaining for you. Company in the US goes, well, that didn't work very well because now there's some complications in tariffs, okay? So that's basically how a tariff works. And I know some of you are already, your minds may be going, well, that doesn't make sense. The US isn't going to pay. Well, that's how it works, okay? Trust me, that's how it works. And so that's how it works, but that's not exactly how it's going to play out in every situation. Now, many, many different scenarios can unfold. Let me continue here. Company in the US is pissed off because there's a 25% import, 25% tariff on this baseball he's going to buy because he knows his customers don't want to pay that much. So now he's going to try and buy another baseball from this Canadian company. And he phones the Canadian company and goes, hey, I want to buy another baseball, but I got charged a tariff when it got across the border, and that's too much money. I can't sell them for that much. You're going to have to lower your price. I can't pay you $1 for that because I'm going to end up being charged 25 cents extra. It doesn't work for me. You got to lower your price 25 cents because I can't sell these things for that much. Canadian company says, I can't lower my price 25 cents. It cost me 80 cents to make these. And he's thinking in his head, well, what do? I'm going to lose this customer. This Canadian importer is I'm going to try and find my baseballs somewhere else. Maybe someone in the US will make the baseballs for me. Of course, he can't. That's one of the arguments for tariffs are a good thing. Maybe he'll find a US company to make the baseballs for him. But the fact that he's importing them from Canada in the first place means that he's probably found this source as the cheapest source for his baseballs. So the Canadian company might think, okay, well, we don't want to lose this customer. How do we do this? Well, it costs us 80 cents to make them. I used to sell them to him for $1. We'll lower our price to 90 cents. Maybe we'll lower it 10 cents. That's as low as we can go. That's called, this company now is going to get squeezed, right? Because this guy doesn't want to pay the his full cost. So he lowers the price to 90 cents. This guy says, okay, I showed him, I negotiated down 90 cents. I'll buy that baseball for 90 cents. Puts the baseball, he wires the 90 cents to the Canadian company. Now the Canadian company has only made 10 cents profit instead of 20. So it's hurt the Canadian company. Canadian company puts the baseball in the truck drives to the border, gets to the border. Border agent says, that's an import from Canada. You have to pay a tariff on that, 25%. What's 25% of 90 cents? I can't do the math in my head. Let's just say it's about 20 cents. We'll round to the nearest nickel, okay? It's not 25 cents anymore. 25% of 90, about 20 cents. So this baseball now, when this American company paid 90 cents to the Canadian company and 20 cents to the border agent, 25% tariff, 20 cents, has paid $1.10 for this baseball. Then he wants to make 20 cents profit. He would have to sell it for $1.30. which is still more than the $1.20 he was selling it for before. And his customers are still bad. So he says, oh, okay, I'll lower the price a little bit. I'll lower the price a nickel. I'll sell them for $1.25. I may be getting some of the math wrong here, guys. Correct me in the. You're seeing what I'm saying here. So he's gonna lower his price a little bit, maybe if he's having trouble selling it to his customers. So he's been squeezed. Okay. So the scenario has unfolded that this 25% tariff has squeezed the Canadian company because he has to try and lower his price a little bit to accommodate so that he doesn't lose a customer. And then the American company that's imported the baseball is getting squeezed a bit because his customers are getting pissed off because they have to pay more. All right? Now, this is called a restrictive policy. Because what's basically happening is every transaction, the federal government of the United States is sucking some money out of it. Okay? They're taking a tariff, so they're taking 25% of the value of the transactions in the trade that's going across the border. That's called a restrictive policy. It'll lead to decreased profits for everybody and generally higher prices for the importing country. All right? That's generally speaking. And I know you guys probably, there's a lot of numbers there and you may be confused and you're probably saying, well, this is stupid, but we don't buy baseballs from Canada anyway. We can make our own baseballs, and you know what? We could get these baseballs a lot cheaper if we just buy them from China. Okay, this was just an example. Okay, this is a baseball. It's just because it happens to be on my coffee table here. But that is an example of a product that, a fluid product that this U.S. importer has options. He doesn't have to buy it from Canada, and this is one of the strategies that sometimes involved with tariffs is, well, we don't have to buy that from Canada. Let's put a tariff on that when it enters the country. So the price has now gone from $1 to $1.25 when you include the tariff, and that's going to give incentive for the American companies or American manufacturing if they're able to produce this product for less than $1.25, the total cost of importing that product, artificially higher because of the tariff, right? Used to be $1, but now it's $1.25. If some American manufacturer can produce that product for less than $1.25, then it's more advantageous to build that product in the US. You see? So there is a strategy of a protectionist kind of strategy that if we apply a tariff and the tariff's high enough that we can build it cheaper in the US, the manufacturing will move to the US. But cheaper than $1.25, maybe some company in the US can build it for $1.15. That's cheaper than $1.25. So the manufacturing will go to the US. But that's more expensive than $1 that you were getting it originally. So what happens is the manufacturing might move to the United States, but the cost will go up, generally, because usually the reason that a company in the US is importing something from another country is because you can get it cheaper from that country. And one of the biggest targets of these tariffs from the point of view of the United States is to target Canadian and Mexican manufacturing of automobiles. One of the big goals is to make automobile manufacturing come back to the United States. But don't kid yourself, there is a reason that American car manufacturers now have chosen to manufacture vehicles, say, in Mexico. And it's not some sort of a complicated conspiracy theory. The reason is because they can do it cheaper, right? And American consumers demand cheaper. But it is true that the tariffs may incentivize companies to bring that manufacturing back to the US. But there are lots of fluid and unintended consequences that could happen. For example, as I did with the example of the baseball, if the tariffs get high enough so that it is economically unfeasible to import from Canada and Mexico, the manufacturing will move to the United States for automobiles I'm talking about. Now let's put the baseball down, we'll talk about automobiles. There could be a transition of more manufacturing of automobiles within the US. But generally speaking, the reason that they're being manufactured outside the US is because it's cheaper to do that. So the manufacturing may move back to the US, but the cost of automobiles will probably go up. And Americans are the biggest consumers of automobiles, and they'll pay higher prices. The second unintended consequence is because the US is such a powerhouse manufacturing country, they export a lot of the things that they manufacture, is by driving business away from, say, Mexico and Canada and causing potentially recessions in those countries, people losing their jobs because the manufacturing moves back into the United States. One of the outcomes could be that the United States produces more automobiles at a higher price, but some of their customers for the export of these automobiles are poorer. Canada is going to be poorer, Mexico will be poorer, so the customers won't be able to afford the higher, or there'll be the drop in demand for the very things that the United States is wanting to manufacture, and drop in demand will mean that you see what I'm saying? It's very complicated. It's very fluid, complicated. Call it a shit show. Very difficult to predict exactly what will happen. And case in point, for example, Tesla, one of the largest manufacturers of automobiles in the world, their biggest manufacturing facility is in China. It's not in China because Elon Musk likes Chinese people. It's in China because that is, for whatever reason, the cheapest, easiest place for him to manufacture them at the lowest cost so that he can sell them and make the most money. So let's move on here. I'm going to do another example because we've talked about baseballs and automobiles. And those are products which are can be described as mobile. All right? There's probably some of you saying, well, hell yeah, we don't need your baseballs. We can make our own baseballs. That's kind of what you read a lot. That is true in the situation or the example of cars and baseballs and other products. But there's a whole other set of products that you could describe as non-mobile. All right? So when you're talking about blanket tariffs, the United States is going to put blanket tariffs on Canada, on all imports from Canada. This is a very strange thing. And let me try and explain it to you. Canada and the United States, now I'm going to talk specifically about our two countries' trading practices. We live in sort of a symbiotic, there's a bit of a symbiotic relationship between Canada and the US. And this is how it works. Canada and the US, both large countries. In fact, Canada's a little bit bigger. The US is a manufacturing powerhouse. The US is one of the world's greatest manufacturing nations and also has approximately 400 million people living there. Very populated manufacturing powerhouse. Got a country next door that's slightly bigger with very few people, 40 million people, 10 times less people, but just as many or more abundant minerals, oil, gas, potash, copper, aluminum, steel, trees. Okay, so Canada is a rich raw materials country. Canada, with its small population and huge, vast country so filled with abundant minerals, we can't possibly use all the stuff we have. We just can't. We cannot possibly use all the uranium we have. We can't possibly use all the copper, all the steel, all the potash, all those things I described. So it's a natural fit for Canada to harvest these things in abundance and call these things are non-mobile. You describe them as non-mobile because you take the example of potash, all right? Completely different than the example of a baseball. If the United States puts a 25% tariff on Canada, and that includes potash, the companies in the United States that want to buy potash from Canada, they don't have the option to say, well, I don't want to pay that much. I'll just get my potash here in the United States. You could put that tariff up as high as you want, 25, 50, 100, 200% tariff on Canadian potash. And that poor American company that needs the potash, and potash is what companies use to make fertilizer, and the whole American farming industry needs potash, basically. Tons and tons and tons of it. all of it comes, something like 80 or 90% of it that the United States uses comes from Canada. There's really no other source. But you could put the tariffs as high as you like. It's an immobile commodity, and American companies would have to pay. There's no other choice, unless the price gets so high that some genius scientist is going to have to invent something other than potash to use, or maybe there's another source somewhere else in the world, very far away, where it has to be put on a tanker and the transportation cost is so high. Right? It's so convenient to just get it from all the potash in North America is in Saskatchewan, put it on a truck. I think it goes to Ontario across the bridge, and it's into the United States. So in the case of immobile stuff, raw materials, tariffs could have very, very unintended consequences if you put tariffs on those type of things. And let me give you the example here. That all those things that I named, all those minerals, uranium, which the United States imports from Canada in vast quantities to use in manufacturing their weapons, aluminum that the United States imports from Canada in massive quantities to make your Bud Light cans, and automobiles and airplanes, right? Copper and zinc and nickel, which is all imported from Canada to make batteries and all types of things. Oil and gas, which is used to make gasoline for your car. All of that stuff. Consider all those things the raw materials necessary to feed the United States economic manufacturing engine. So the United States is a manufacturing superpower, is what I said. And a lot of the raw materials used to manufacture things within the United States are imported from Canada, which is rich in these types of things, and we have much more than we need. So if you tariff those things, what happens is the inputs for all the manufacturing that occurs in the United States, the prices of all those inputs increases. It's a very restrictive policy because the United States government would be sucking 25% out of all the value of those imports entering the United States. The US government would be raking in the money, but the inputs for all the manufacturing going on in the US would all increase in price. So the importers will pay the 25% tariff. They'll sell the stuff to manufacturers. They'll pass that cost on. The manufacturers will build things. It'll cost them more. So they'll pass those costs on to the distributors and the retailers. The retailers will pay more for the finished products. And they'll say, oh, we paid more, our profits getting squeezed. They'll pass that cost on to the regular schmoes that end up eventually showing up at Walmart ready to buy their power tool or whatever it is that has aluminum and nickel and copper in the cord and rubber and all the inputs that went into manufacturing that product that were all more expensive. The poor regular schmo that goes to the store ends up paying. At the end of the day, us regular schmoes get screwed. And that's how it works. And in the case of products that are not mobile, tariffs are a very, very restrictive policy. As opposed to, I'm going to give you the other side now, this is what's called in macroeconomics a restrictive policy. Anything that the government does that sucks money out of the economy, that makes trade or makes borrowing more expensive, is called a restrictive policy. And tariffs suck money out of the transactions. It's a restrictive policy which will generally lead to a slowdown in trade and a slowdown in the economy. And that's why we're seeing the stock markets react to that by going down. They anticipate that there could be a recession, that there will be a slowdown in economic growth. Investors are not anticipating profits to keep increasing at the rate they are, so they're selling stocks. Okay? As opposed to, I'll give you the flip side here, as a contrast, a restrictive policy, a stimulus policy. And you guys in the United States probably know this. You've lived through a stimulus policy over the last 4, 5, 6 years. One of the biggest ones is the incentives that were put on the table to encourage people to buy electric vehicles in the United States and in Canada and in a lot of places. That was a stimulus policy. How does that work? Well, a manufacturer builds a product that costs a certain amount of money. It costs $50,000. It's very expensive. The demand for that product is not very high because it's very expensive, but the government wants to encourage, wants to stimulate that industry for whatever reason, right? We're not talking ideology or anything. It could be electric cars, it could be baseballs, right? You want to stimulate the purchase of baseballs, you give an incentive. You say, well, if you buy an electric vehicle, the state government or the federal government's going to give you a $5,000 rebate or a $10,000 incentive check. That's a stimulus policy. That increases the demand and makes those things sell. That makes that industry grow faster. Okay, that's the opposite of a tariff. Tariff is a restrictive policy. The Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve control interest rates. If they raise interest rates, that's a restrictive policy. They make borrowing money more expensive. Right? If borrowing money is more expensive, that's sucking money. The interest payments, when you borrow money, if the interest payments are higher, it sucks money out of the economy. That restricts the economy as a whole. It slows the economy down. Right? They did that in response to inflation. Prices were so high, the economy was booming. We've got to slow things down. If we slow things down, people will get hurt, and then there'll be less demand from consumers to buy things. We'll raise interest rates until the demand from consumers to buy things decreases and prices go down, and that'll stop inflation. That's restrictive policy. If we're going into a recession and those banks are worried about the economy slowing down, then they do a stimulus policy. They lower interest rates. As a matter of fact, the Bank of Canada just lowered interest rates today, I believe, because they're worried. The Bank of Canada is worried about these tariffs that are going between the United States and Canada could slow down economic growth, and they're trying to counteract that by stimulating. From a macroeconomic point of view, and the government is taxes, right? Increasing taxes, if a government increases taxes, that's a restrictive policy because they're sucking money out of the economy. If the government lowers taxes, that's a stimulating policy because they're leaving more money in the economy. Now, we could do a whole other video on this because lowering taxes, when you start delving into that, it's actually a little bit more complicated than you think. The best thing to do from a macroeconomic point of view is to lower taxes on the biggest consuming group in the economy, which would be the middle class. A middle class tax cut would be the biggest stimulus for an economy. And this sounds really bad, but lowering taxes on the poorest people is not very stimulating from a macroeconomic point of view because that just kind of like just helps them just get by, but they're not big consumers. Sounds bad. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't lower taxes for like the poor, but that doesn't stimulate the economy very much. Lowering taxes on the ultra wealthy billionaire class also, it just kind of makes them richer, but doesn't really stimulate the economy that much. There's a lot of steps that would have to happen to stimulate the economy when you lower taxes on the ultra rich. They would have to actually use the tax cuts and the extra money they have to create business and to do something to actually stimulate. You have to count on them to follow through with their extra money to try and stimulate the economy. The best way to stimulate for a government lowering taxes would be to lower taxes on the whole middle class. That's the topic of a whole other video. In general, tariffs are a restrictive policy that can be used in a targeted way to influence where things are manufactured. And an example of that, here's the ultimate example, is, and this is a protectionist policy that North America as a whole is using. It's much, much cheaper. For whatever reason, the Chinese can build cars much, much cheaper than we can in North America. And I'm talking now Mexico, Canada, and the United States. They can build cars for a fraction of what we can. Elon Musk knows this. That's why he has his biggest Tesla plant is in China. Well, it's no surprise that both Canada and the US have a massive tariff on Chinese automobiles. Why? Because they fear that cheap Chinese vehicles will easily become more affordable and more popular if they were available in North America, and that would really hurt the domestic, both Canadian, Mexican, and U.S. manufacturers of automobiles. So both Canada and the U.S., and I believe Mexico too, have, maybe not Mexico, but we have massive tariffs, 100, 150% on, I think it's 100% on Chinese automobile imports to protect. Whether it's right or wrong, you'll hear the rhetoric, oh, the Chinese build them unfairly, they have forced labor, you'll hear lots of rhetoric, but the reason is because they want to protect the industry in Canada. So that's a targeted tariff on one product from, say, China, and that's used to protect an industry that you don't want to have competition from. And the reason is because there's a lot of people that are employed in the manufacturing of automobiles in North America. And both governments, Canadian and American, have chosen to protect that. So they can be used in a targeted way like that. But when they're used as sweeping tariff on everything, kind of as a form of revenue for the government, they will restrict economic growth, they will slow things down, and they will generally lead to higher prices in both countries, and potentially then slow down in the economy that could actually decrease demand. You could end up with higher prices and decreased demand, and things like a myriad of shit show eventualities that are hard to predict. It's really almost impossible to predict how it will shake out. Uncertainty, which the market does not like, and that's one of the big reasons you're seeing the stock market react to this uncertainty by selling off. People are taking their money off the table, saying, "Oh, I got to sit this one out until things, until things settle out." And we know exactly what's going on, then we'll know what sectors to invest in. Okay, so does that make sense? I thought maybe it was a long-winded explanation, but I think just using some simple examples maybe helped out. And I wanted to make the video because I've read a lot of comments and a lot of people, it seems, get their information from, they'll watch a 15-second TikTok video, or they'll read an article on Facebook for 2 minutes, or they'll tune into Fox News for 30 seconds, or they'll tune into CNN for 25 seconds and hear something. And what you got to understand is that everyone has a different reason for promoting their ideology or their point of view. And all of these sources might just give you a little snippet of what I talked about. Maybe one of them will say, the tariffs will make us manufacture the stuff in our own country, and that's partly true. That can happen, but it's very complicated. Then another snippet that you hear from a different source will say, if these tariffs stay in, there'll be a huge recession, if not depression. And that potentially is true, but not necessarily. Everyone will zero in on their one little. They'll cut out their one little idea that fits with their ideology and kind of promote that the way the media is these days. That it seems that no one has kind of grasped the whole picture of how complicated this is. One of the key things that I just want to come across in this video, and a lot of people still don't understand this, and I bet we're going to have some comments in the comment section of people still disagreeing. But one of the main things is that it is the businesses from the importing nation that pay the tariffs. If Canada applies tariffs to the United States, the companies in Canada that import goods from the United States will pay those tariffs, and vice versa. If the United States applies tariffs on Canada, it'll be the companies that import products from Canada in the United States that pay those tariffs to their respective governments. Right? So the governments are sucking that money out of the transaction. And there will be people that say, no, we're going to apply tariffs on Canada, and Canada's going to pay. Well, it just doesn't work like that. The U.S. could say, we're going to apply a tariff on Canada, and they have no authority to come to Canada and take the money. Right? It's the importers in the U.S. that are going to pay that tariff to the American government. And somehow that has been lost, and a lot of people don't understand that. So if that's all you can take away out of this video, maybe you've learned something. Let me know if I've talked too long, or whether you guys have appreciate this, or whether you leave some comments. Let me know what you think. And if you're enjoying the content, if you're happy that I did this, please subscribe and maybe share the video. It was a long one. I'm gonna have my coffee now, which is cold now. It's been sitting here the whole time, right beside my baseball. What is my baseball? And I'm gonna drink my coffee now and enjoy my day. You guys enjoy your day, and I will catch you on the next one.